Excellency and honored guests, welcome to our event today on the importance of the family in the eradication of poverty and for peace and prosperity. My name is Lisa Carenti. I'm the Executive Vice President for the Center for Family and Human Rights, also known as CFAM. Today's event was organized by the Mission of Belarus and CFAM. I'd like to thank the group of Friends of the Family for co-sponsoring today's event, and to our civil society co-sponsors, Family Watch International and Campaign Life Coalition. The group of Friends of the Family is a coalition that works to elevate the status of the family at the UN as defined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 1994 the International Year of the Family in its Resolution 44/82. This year, 2024, marks the 30th anniversary of that observance. It is especially fitting that we should hold an event to mark this anniversary during the Commission for Social Development because of the important role of the family for social protection. Social protection systems are at the breaking point, and poverty eradication is under threat everywhere. The family is the most powerful predictor of upward economic mobility and the most important social safety net. To achieve Agenda 2030, the international community and governments must make the family a central focus of economic and social protection policies. Resolution 44/82 emphasized that governments, civil society, and international agencies should create among governments, policymakers, and the public a greater awareness of the family as the natural and fundamental unit of society, citing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We are here today to do just this. I'd first like to give the floor to the representatives of the countries that are serving as the secretariat of the group of Friends of the Family to offer their statements. After the panel, there will be an opportunity for additional member states and civil society representatives that work to promote family policy to make statements. I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Fahad Mohammed Al-Karim, Assistant Undersecretary for Social Development, Ministry of Social Development and the Family of the State of Qatar, for his opening statement. Excellency, thank you for being here today. You have the floor.
Thank you for giving the floor. Allow me to speak in Arabic. Excellencies, members, distinguished members of delegations, member states of the group Friends of the Family, distinguished panelists, allow me at the outset to express our deep thanks and gratitude to the permanent mission of Belarus for their great efforts to organize this side event. The State of Qatar is honored to co-sponsor, as it's an occasion to listen to your views and to exchange views and best practices regarding policies towards the family, as well as strengthening the role of the family in eradicating poverty and realizing peace and prosperity. We are greatly honored by your presence. The State of Qatar is proud of his being a member of the group Friends of the Families and looks forward to actively participate in the activities of the group, which is an important platform to mobilize support to the family and to give it the necessary importance that it deserves. Current exceptional conditions in our countries and their implications push us to realize sustainable development, and we need to take strong measures to strengthen measures and programs for the family and to enable the family to guarantee a better future for all the members of the family so that it can realize its full potential and to play its role as effective as possible in the society. Having reached the midterm before fulfilling our commitment to realize sustainable development by 2030, the projection of initiatives for the family and to create the role necessary and to strengthen their role is now more important than any before, so that the family can participate in realizing the development programs, including combating poverty, which is the major challenge the world is facing. The State of Qatar appreciates the important and positive contributions of the family in several innumerable fields. My country pursues its role to strengthen the role of the family as the basic nucleus and to enable it to face the challenges in our changing world. The state of Qatar at the national level has scored several successes in the social field and the role of the family. The Ministry of Social Development and Family awards great importance to the role of the families, and the section regarding the family in the ministry concentrates on enhancing the role of the family and children and to enlighten people about the rights and the challenges at the regional and international level by drawing the strategies and national policies relative to the family and its members, to organize conferences, seminars, workshops to discuss the issues of the family and the child in cooperation with specialized government and private institutions. Qatar seeks to play the role of facilitator within the G77 and China regarding the resolutions of the General Assembly on the family. Having assumed this role during the several years, emphasizes the role of Qatar and its ability to push implementing these resolutions and encouraging and strengthening the role of the objectives of the International Year of the Family. Excellencies, this year comes at the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family. We avail ourselves of our participation today to mention that the state of Qatar looks forward to hosting the conference to celebrate the 30th anniversary in cooperation with the Doha Family Institute scheduled in Doha next October. We call on each and all to participate. By hosting this conference, the state of Qatar reflects the special attention that my country awards to the role and enhancement of the family and strengthening its role in order to face current and emerging challenges. The conference will be an important platform to discuss important measures, especially those relative to new emerging technologies and to organize international migration. In conclusion, today we aspire for your recommendations and recommendations, and we strengthen that Qatar stays ready to participate with all participants so that the family can enjoy and realize development, success, and prosperity. We thank you for the floor.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to now turn the floor over to Mr. Pavel Yevseyenko, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Belarus to the United Nations.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to the event organized on the sidelines of the 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development. We welcome the opportunity to get together with friends who share family values and our common aspirations to strengthen the institution of the family and ensure its well-being. We sincerely thank you, the panelists, for their participation today and look forward to hearing their views and perspectives regarding family-oriented policies and programs. We commend the impressive work of our friends and long-standing civil society partners who co-sponsor this event and who are always at the forefront of protecting families and children. We appreciate your commitment to promoting family values, and we are fortunate to have such dedicated and reliable partners. It goes without saying to us that the path to any prosperous and peaceful society lies through the institution of the family, designed to transmit to future generations the moral strengths, traditions, and values that support civilization. The family is a link to our past and a bridge to our future. And today, It depends on us as to what kind of future we will have. We firmly believe that the family is the starting point for solving a range of global challenges, from reducing poverty to combating climate change. Therefore, first of all, we need to ensure the safety and well-being of the family and to protect it from challenges and threats of our time. We are convinced that the support of the family should become a fundamental part of public policies around the world. This is necessary for our children, for future generations, and for the future of human society. This year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family. We see this celebration as an excellent opportunity to reaffirm the family is not an institution of a bygone era. We are glad that our friendship within the group is growing stronger. The voice of our group is heard today more than ever. Last year, the group's membership was expanded. We warmly welcome the decision of Sri Lanka, Syria, and the Gambia to join us. We thank you for this, and we hope that other member states will follow your example. For our part, we will continue and intensify efforts to promote the family agenda. We thank you all for your continued and valuable support. We appreciate your constructive approach and your trust, and we will continue to work hard to maintain it. In conclusion, we thank all partners for co-organizing these events and look forward to expanding and deepening our cooperation with member states, civil society, academia, and all relevant stakeholders for the sake of the integrity and well-being of the family. Because we believe that a strong family of today is a sustainable society of tomorrow. I thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Ms. Heba Mustafa, Minister Plenipotentiary of the Arab Republic of Egypt to the United Nations. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and good afternoon, distinguished participants and distinguished panelists. Of course, I'm honored to be seated here and represent my country in this important event. And actually, I will start with maybe the ending note of referencing the increasing and the growing number of membership of the group of Friends of the Family here at the UN. It's here and in Geneva, the Geneva chapter as well. The number is growing, and it's very encouraging, and it is a testament that the family remains relevant, that there are still countries and societies who believe in the centrality of the role of the family. Even some parties who claim that they don't really support that context, they do realize and recognize that however we function and however we discuss this issue, we go back to the idea of the family. Because and let me just take us back a little bit back in the past. And we go back, for example, to Copenhagen and its core themes and how they link up to the 2030 agenda and where the family is placed in this context. So the core themes of Copenhagen are the eradication of extreme poverty, social exclusion, and unemployment. And these remain relevant to today's world as much as they were 30 years ago. And indeed, the 2030 agenda itself recognizes extreme poverty as an overarching concern. And this is reflected again in the SDG Summit Declaration that was adopted back in September by heads of states and government, recognizing that we still have a problem that we have to address. How does this relate to the family or impact the family? Copenhagen did recognize that the family is the basic unit of society and it has a key role to play in social development. And long before that, the Universal Declaration for Human Rights has recognized the family as the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is accordingly entitled to protection by society and the state. So the state has that legal obligation, actually, to protect the family as an institution, to preserve its place and central role within the community, within the society, within the larger population, because this is how you protect also the members of the family. This is the place where the intergenerational aspect of care and support, care for children, care for the elderly, care for the youth, care for persons with disabilities, and overall nurturing environment happens. It caters for the psychological well-being, the welfare of its members, for the physical well-being and the spiritual well-being as well. So it keeps us all balanced in a sense from the personal perspective. We all come from families, we belong to families. Even children without parental care do receive some sort of a quasi environment that reminisces or replicates the idea of a family environment in order for them to be brought up in a nurturing environment that preserves the best interests of the child. So I agree with the introductory remarks that the compounding challenges that we are seeing in today's world, and we've been witnessing this for a number of years now, are a real threat to the family itself, because states are under duress, they are under stress, they don't have fiscal space to implement policies, social policies, although they do sit down and they do design family-oriented policies. Family-oriented policies that have this perspective of caring for the children, that has this perspective of caring for women, especially when it comes to female-headed households, for example, and how you generate income in order to keep the family intact and to keep the welfare of the family intact as well. But again, the fiscal space is quite limited, the resources are limited, and hence the spending is limited in order to finance those programs and projects that are family-oriented. And it is a difficulty for governments to do that, and hence the need to discuss how the family is impacted by challenges that threaten to drive families into extreme poverty, and how we can consolidate its role in supporting its members from falling into this trap. And this is what needs to be the focus of the discussion, that we need to see that the family has a role in fighting extreme poverty, but it also is threatened by the challenges that exist and may fall into extreme poverty. So it's a two-faced coin in a sense, and we need to address both aspects. And this happens at the national level, but also at the regional and the international levels, and in our cooperation with other partners. At the national level, in Egypt, we do have this perspective. So we have a special program or a project for family development, for the development of the Egyptian family. And it takes into account the relation with population development as well, because we are a growing population, and this has to be addressed. It requires attention to healthcare. It requires attention to schooling and education, to providing adequate housing, and this comes also within a larger project which is called Decent Life, that addresses rural areas, that addresses families in extreme poverty situations in order to provide access to safe drinking water and sanitation, proper infrastructure, and the overall context of adequate housing, in addition to education for children, addressing, children, leaving schools because of lack of, for example, food security. So we do have those programs that keep children in schools through providing food rations, and this is done also in cooperation with some UN entities, and also in cooperation with civil society, who go to the grassroots, who go to those areas that are generally remote areas or areas and places that have been disenfranchised for a long time. And we address the needs of these people. So it's about housing, safe drinking water and sanitation, healthcare, it's about education and other aspects, and also through providing microfinancing to families, especially female-headed households, in order for them to be able to generate income, and in order to keep the family intact and prevent the idea that, for example, children might go into child labor, because this would be also one of the repercussions of a family being driven into extreme poverty. So this is an important aspect of it. So the microfinancing goes for very tiny projects that help especially female-headed households, in order to be able to provide for the members of the families and to keep the family in its place, in order to be able to play its key role. I had the intervention not really prepared. I wanted it to be more interactive and a reflection of what we discuss here, as well as part of our national experiences, and I don't want to take more of your time, maybe to leave the room for questions and answers and further interaction. I thank you.
Thank you, Heba, and thank you to the Secretariat and all the member states who comprise the group of the Friends of the Family. We are very grateful for the many excellent statements that are made throughout the year that keeps the focus and priority on family policy. At this time, we have a short video that came to us from Family Watch International on the on the importance of family and social development, and then we'll go to our panel presentations.
Countries gathered at the United Nations and committed to a bold 15-year plan of action with 17 goals for people, the planet, and prosperity. Known as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, this plan aims to create a world free of poverty, hunger, disease, and want. A world where each country enjoys sustainable economic growth. A world without violence and where women and girls are empowered. A world where a good education is accessible to all. But how are nations to accomplish these lofty goals? According to the United Nations Resolution on the Protection of the Family, these goals will be difficult to attain unless the strategies to achieve them focus on the family. This is because, as the Family Resolution also states, the family contributes to eradicating poverty and hunger, achieving universal primary education, promoting gender equality, empowering women, reducing child mortality, and more. Yet, unfortunately, the contribution of the family in the achievement of development goals continues to be largely overlooked, despite the fact that the family is key to solving many world problems. Research shows that men, women, and children do better when it comes to health, wealth, and education when they are part of a strong, stable family. Indeed, the wealth of nations depends in no small part on the health of its families. Take education. Across the globe, children living with their two parents are more likely to be successful in school. In countries across the world, from Indonesia to Singapore to Sweden, children were about 40% less likely to be held back in school if they lived with two parents compared to just one. Kids benefit from having the attention, time, and resources of both a mother and a father when it comes to excelling in school. Thus, strong families make for successful students. What about children's health? In much of the world, family instability is associated with higher levels of disease, stunted growth, and child mortality. A global study from Child Trends shows that kids in Africa, Asia, and Latin America from intact homes are almost 1/5 less likely to die than children whose mothers divorced or remarried. The resources, stability, and lower levels of stress typically provided in a two-parent family benefits the health of kids. Thus, strong families make for healthier children. Take the empowerment of girls. Having a family with a father present is a protective factor against adolescent girls being sexually active or abused. From the United States to Kenya, we know that teenage girls without a father are 2 times more likely to get pregnant. Good fathers provide their daughters with the affection, attention, and guidance they need to be safer and healthier. Thus, strong families make for girls with brighter futures. What about development? Countries with more married parent families enjoy higher levels of economic growth. Indeed, a study sponsored by the Social Trends Institute finds that the family factor is one of the best predictors of growth in countries across the world. Undoubtedly, one reason growth is higher in countries with more married parent families is because children do better in stable, intact families. Men also tend to work harder, smarter, and more successfully when they are married. Thus, strong families make for successful, wealthier nations. Clearly, the family plays a key role in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And since governments can never adequately compensate for the irreplaceable role of the family, nations have a vested interest in protecting this natural and fundamental unit of society. Because as the family goes, so go the children, so goes the nation, so goes the world.
We thank Family Watch International, one of the co-sponsoring organizations for the video. We'll now move to our panel presentation. And first up is Dr. Timothy Rarick, who is a professor and the director of the Marriage and Family Studies program at Brigham Young University, Idaho. Dr. Rarick has worked with several governments and organizations to promote and protect the family through public policy, research, and public scholarship. Tim is a former research fellow for the Marriage and Religion Research Institute at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. He currently serves as the chairman of the board for the Idaho State Department of Health and Welfare. Dr. Rarick has been invited to speak in Asia, Central America, Europe, the Caribbean, and throughout the U.S. on the role of the family in addressing social issues. Tim has been married for 23 years. He's here today with his youngest daughter, Eleanor. We welcome you both. You have the floor.
Thank you. And thank you to the distinguished panelists and the countries who are sponsoring this. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. I spoke in this room many years ago, so this brings back memories. Hopefully they'll be fun this time as well. Quick disclaimer, I'm going to fly through my slides quite quickly because there's a lot to unpack here. And hopefully if you have more questions, you want references or resources, I can give them to you at the end. That video stole some of my thunder. I don't need to share some of my stuff because that video covered some of the things I'm going to share, which is great. I think it's fine. So could you go to the next slide? There's an author, a poet, who wrote this great poem talking about people who want an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and other people are clamoring for a fence at the top of the cliff. And the people at the bottom are saying, no, don't take away our agency and our autonomy, because we want to be able to have our ambulance and do what we want. The people who want the fence at the top says, can't we prevent a lot more problems if we put a fence? So this argument goes back and forth throughout the poem. I think this is going to be the tone for what I'd like to speak on. Could you go to the next slide? So I want to address weird morals. This is from the authors you can see below. They have identified as weird morals is that people who are from Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic countries. And sadly, in the social sciences, those people are overrepresented, their voices and their representation. So it's not a representative sample. Why this matters is because people who are weird, according to this acronym, are, could you go to the next slide? According to the authors, the more weird you are, the more you see a world full of separate objects rather than relationships. And when you think about what that has to do with the family, I think it's quite significant. In fact, when you talk to young people who have more of a WEIRD, weird perspective, they're more likely to see when they engage in romantic and sexual relationships as other people as vehicles or obstacles rather than people. More likely to, not guaranteed to. So hopefully this sets the stage for what I'm going to be talking about when eradicating poverty. I guess what I'm referring to is that the more weird you are, the more likely you are to say, I want an ambulance at the bottom and dispel with the fence at the top. Let's get rid of that because it's holding back my individualism. Could you go to the next slide? So there's three major ethics that Jonathan Haidt, who's an NYU professor, moral psychologist, I'm going to just hit on two of them for this presentation. If you're wondering what this has to do with poverty, stay with me, I promise. I'll let you know. The ethic of autonomy is based on the idea that people are first and foremost autonomous individuals with wants, needs, and preferences. People should be free to satisfy these wants and needs and preferences as they see fit. This is the dominant ethic in individualistic societies. And research has shown that the United States is one of the most individualistic. That has its pros and cons. But when it comes to family formation and family strength and family structure, if you focus solely on this ethic or this lens, you can view an ethic as a pair of glasses that you put on. If you look at the world only through this, the more weird you are, the less likely your society and your cultures are going to have strong families. Could you do the next thing? I was in the subway just last night with my daughter, and I took a picture of this on the subway, and I thought, this is a great encapsulation of ethic of autonomy. A free and open society is where we have the right to our own beliefs and thoughts and privacy and right to decide. So it's all about what I want to be able to do, which is good, but when it's untethered from the next ethic, it can be disastrous for families and for society. So this is not a bad thing, but by itself it can be. Could you go to the next slide? Ethic of a community is based on the ideas that people are first and foremost members of larger entities, such as families, teams, armies, companies, tribes, and nations. People have an obligation to play their assigned roles in these entities. Many societies develop, therefore, moral concepts such as duty, responsibility, respect, and reputation. So when you couple autonomy with a community, we start to see in the research that countries, regardless if they're Western, Eastern, or anywhere in between, when you combine these two ethics, along with ethic of divinity, which I won't touch on right now, the societies tend to flourish, regardless of a lot of factors. Could you go to this was 10 years ago, the first time I spoke at the United Nations. This was on the subway. This is a bit more of an ethic of community, where the first slide was more of an ethic of autonomy. In my observation and the research that I've seen and done, this idea of offers your seat to someone else and getting outside of yourself and be thinking of others in Western cultures is diminishing more and more and more, because this is as so much about ethic of autonomy, because the ethic of autonomy, when it's unchecked by community, can produce rampant individualism, and then produces societies and policies that are focused on individuals, which you will see. I'm going to connect that to how that has to do with poverty. Next slide, please. So what does this have to do with the family? Next. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, eminent psychologist and sociologist, said the family is the most powerful, the most humane, and by far the most economical system known for building competence and character. Those two words are key. Competence meaning social competence, academic, professional, and otherwise. Character meaning good, a person who I would just summarize as a good person who does the right thing for the right reasons. But in short, the family is the best system for doing that. There are those that believe the government is, the schools, nonprofits, those are all great entities, but according to his research, as you look throughout the entire system from macro to micro systems, the family is the best system for building the competence and character. Most powerful and humane, I need to add as well. Next. So, family structure and family stability matter because family bonds and belonging and commitment matter to eradicate social and economic poverty. You may be wondering, what's social poverty? I think I have it on the next slide. Social poverty is an important term here. Dr. Sarah Halpern-Meakin wrote a book. She wrote about this. She's at the Institute for Research on Poverty. She said, I argue that social poverty, the lack of close and trusted relationships one can rely on, is a distinct phenomenon worthy of serious attention, not just as a derivative of economic poverty, although the two phenomena are correlated. Financial poverty matters, without a doubt. However, to assert that in the presence of financial poverty, no other issue can or should be received priority fails to respect the wishes, plans, and needs of low-income people. So in fact, the family is the best system for developing or eradicating not just social poverty, but economic poverty. And the more someone is lacking in that social skills, knowing how to develop relationships, intimate relationships, healthy, lasting, stable relationships, the better they're able to do that, the more economic mobility we will see in them. Next slide, please. So just a few slides of data here. You can see just a proportion of 18 to 24-year-olds that live with unmarried partner than a spouse. This is just a trend over time that we're seeing, especially in more Western countries such as Western Europe, Canada, the United States, and others. You see a crossover of people, of married partners living together versus cohabiting. You may say, well, why does that matter? Well, it does matter. It matters significantly for children, it matters significantly for commitment, and it matters significantly for poverty. Next slide. We see in 1989, 1990 a great crossover where the average in the United States, and other countries have followed this trend as well, although the year isn't exactly the same, where the average age of a woman's or a man's first child being born is younger than the average age of their first marriage. That crossover happened in 89, 90. And that's pretty significant because you're starting to see we've seen for years a rise in out-of-wedlock births and a delay or an avoidance of marriage, and especially individualistic societies that are focusing primarily on autonomy and not on community as much. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So, according to the Census Bureau here in the United States, 1 out of 3 children live in biological father-absent homes. If you could just click through. Yep, and you can see a big change. Thank you. Big change in the last 60 years. How that's changed in the United States. And many other countries, some that I've worked with and spoken with, they've seen a similar trend, maybe not in the same amount of time, but you can follow a lot of cultural and social trends back through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where it became even more individualistic and more ethic of autonomy, and therefore people have a harder time forming healthy relationships because it's more about their individual pursuits, which is, again, is okay, but if it's unchecked, then that can be problematic. Could you go to the next slide? Here's some risk of children in this country and several others who are raised in fatherless homes. They're 4 times greater risk of poverty to be raised in fatherless homes, 7 times more likely to become pregnant as a teenager. That's significant because that's a factor that's correlated. Teen pregnancies is correlated with poverty and low socioeconomic status. Could you click over once? Thank you. They're more likely to have behavioral problems. Fatherless children are more likely to go to prison, drop out of high school, commit crime. Again, a lot of these factors correlate with low socioeconomic status and poverty. Next slide, please. So I tried to summarize this in a vicious cycle and an auspicious cycle. Fatherless child, more likely to live in poverty, more likely to become poorly educated, impaired competence and skills, risky sexual behavior, more likely to have a child out of wedlock, more likely to cohabit or divorce, and then another fatherless child. You can see an auspicious cycle in the other way. Of course, this is correlative. It doesn't mean that this is a one-to-one correlation, that every single situation, if every son or daughter had an involved married father, that they're going to be perfectly well off when it comes to poverty. But the data are clear enough that we can't ignore this trend. Could you go to the next? Okay, what does this mean for daughters? Really quickly, let's zoom in why fathers matter when it comes to poverty. One more time. And keep going. Thank you. So married fathers who are involved in their daughter's life are less likely to be overly dependent on men, less likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, be raped and sexually abused, less likely to develop an eating disorder. Better dealing with authority, those in like men especially. They're more likely to be emotionally secure and self-confident, less likely to become pregnant as a teenager, and they're more likely to become academically and professionally successful. Think about what that has to do with the formation of future relationships for this daughter. What we see in the research is the opposite sex parent tends to set the tone for the opposite sex. So the father is the entry point into future male relationships for that girl. And if she doesn't learn that social competence, and she's learned to develop social poverty, incompetence, then she has a harder time forming healthy relationships with men, less likely to become academically and professionally successful, and a much greater likelihood of poverty. If you could go to the next slide. What does this mean for sons? If you zoom in on dads, I'm picking on dads because motherlessness is not an epidemic like fatherlessness is. Married fathers who are involved in their sons' lives are going to raise sons who are more likely to treat women and girls with respect. These boys are more likely to share equally in family responsibilities, have healthy views of masculinity, less likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, less likely to join gangs, less likely to commit crime and being imprisoned. And here's another reference to poverty, more likely to be academically and professionally successful, and less likely to father children out of wedlock. Again, a strong correlation with poverty. And more likely to provide or co-provide for their children. If you go to the next slide. So 2/3 of young unmarried mothers are poor, and around 25% go on welfare within the 3 years of a child's birth. Low educational attainment among teen mothers affects their economic opportunities and earnings in later years. 2 years ago, colleagues and I published an article of the role of educational attainment in mothers and in sub-Saharan Africa countries and what that has to do with intimate partner violence. And we see a strong correlation between reducing intimate partner violence and education in these mothers. But still, we can go one step further. What can we do to help boys become committed, healthy men who will actually maybe seek out marriage if the opportunity presents itself? And then when they do get married, stay true to that woman and true to that child. Let's go a little bit more with this on the poverty scale. Data from the U.S. Census Bureau finds that the following proportion of family types with children under the age of 18 lived in poverty. You can see the data there. Single mother, single father. Married couples is the gold standard in the social science right now when it comes to eradicating poverty or minimizing poverty. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I'll skip that one. I don't know why that's on there twice. Okay. The percent of children in each family type whose families received food stamps just 2 years ago. You can see there that it's cut off at the bottom, but the lowest percentage is the married family. I believe it's about 12% is less likely to receive food stamps. So, again, I'm going to give some solutions of what I think we can do about this. Could you go to the next slide? Oh, 10%. It's even better, see? I underpromise and overdeliver. Okay, next one. The U.S. federal government spends more than $1 billion every year on programs such as child enforcement and anti-poverty effects to support father-absent homes. So the National Fatherhood Initiative in the United States has called him the billion-dollar man, because if we could get him involved in the child's life and married to the woman with the children he helps create, you can save a lot of money. So could you go to the next slide? When one considers the magnitude of these findings, it's easy to conclude that overwhelmed governmental systems, courts, law enforcement, healthcare, subsidies, and public schools, nonprofits, therapists, and many others are attempting to pick up the pieces of family breakdown due to absentee dads, and I would say due to marital breakdown especially. Indeed, we all pay the price, literally. Next slide. Here's some research on the success sequence that many social scientists have found, that when millennials have at least a high school degree, graduate from high school, have a full-time job, then get married, then have children, their chances of poverty extremely low. You can see the percentage goes down drastically. And even if they come from low educational or low socioeconomic status, their economic mobility still goes upward if they follow the old school idea of first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby in a baby carriage. Oh, and get some education while you're at it. So could you go to the next one? I was going to tell you a story of one of my students from Haiti. She's an example of father figures coming into your life and changing. She was in terrible, impoverished circumstances in Haiti. She now has a master's degree from NYU in social work, and she's really changed her life and is married to her husband there, and she has 2 sons. I'll skip her story, even though it's really inspiring. So we need more family capital rather than just social capital. What I'm talking about is more married couples who are willing to commit to each other. Well, how do we do that? I'll skip this one. I'm going to skip this one. A family capital lens helps increase social and moral capital and decrease poverty. This is because children, adults, and the economy thrive in bonds of love and commitment. Could you go to the next one? We'll skip this. Karen Bogenschneider has a great book on family policy called Family Policy Matters. I can send you the reference if you would like. She talks about how policymakers typically look from an individualistic lens, ethic of autonomy, and it doesn't really help with eradicating poverty as much as we think it does. So what can be done? I'll give you a few solutions, and I'll give you more after this if you would like. Policymakers need good empirical evidence to see that marriage is the father factor in addressing most social problems, especially welfare reform. Next. Educate boys, men, and fathers in community schools and prisons and social work. And there's a lot of nonprofits that do this well. Sometimes governments try to create their own program. When I was in the Bahamas, there's 2 fantastic programs that get boys grow to men and become involved fathers. And the government wasn't giving them any money at the time. And I'm trying to work with them right now to help them put the hustle behind that muscle, if I can put it that way. Could you go to the next one? Academics, therapists, and addiction recovery programs find and utilize the data to demonstrate marriage and father factor in child's optimal development. Next. Incorporate the success sequence into schools. Wouldn't that be great if we could teach children? If you can couple sex education with relationship education, you're doing them a great service. But if you do sex education devoid of relationship education, it's a dangerous and disastrous result, because then people are learning just how to have sex safely. They're not learning how to have intimate relationships. Intimacy is social, it's emotional, it's even spiritual, and it's physical. Sex education only focuses on the physical domain, which is the ethic of autonomy, primarily. Could you go to the next slide? So premarital education, all these things that we can do to put money, yes, poverty programs can help, subsidies can help, but what can we do to put money into schools, into nonprofits, and into other organizations that are trying to help promote healthy relationship formation? Marital breakdown doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It happens over years and cultural ideas where people become so focused on maybe toxic ideas that they don't realize are bad. Could you go to the next one? And I'll finish off with these. You can just click through them really quickly. So we need to strengthen a dating and marriage culture. Professor Robbie George at Princeton says, marriage increases the odds that a man will be committed to both the children that he helps create and the woman with whom he does so. We need to expose ideas and messages that elevate women at the expense of men, view all masculinity as toxic, mock and demean marriage and commitment, promote sexual liberty without commitment and responsibility, and encourage laziness, selfishness, and commitment avoidance. So one more slide. This is one, you can teach this, and my students are learning how to teach this in schools. This is how you form healthy relationships. You don't trust somebody more than you know them. You don't rely on them more than you trust them. You don't commit them more than you rely on them. And you don't touch them more than anything else. This is relationship education 101. And sadly, in many countries, and especially this one, we don't do this very well. And then my final thought, we'll just skip this. My final thought, if you could just fly through it, these are ideas to how to reestablish marriage if we want to bring economic mobility. Let's stop here. I believe we need a fence at the top and an ambulance at the bottom. If we want to eradicate poverty in our societies, in our countries, we got to learn how to do preventative, that's fence, and reparative measures, that's ambulance. We need both. We need ethic of autonomy and community combined together. And people are trying to figure out, young people want to figure this out. People are driving off the cliff ignorantly, not knowing where that leads, because they think in the name of autonomy, I'm going to do what I want. Education dispels ignorance. And when people can be educated academically, socially, emotionally, and otherwise, form healthy relationships, stable marriages, you'll see a lot stronger contributors to the society and the economic welfare, not just of those individuals of that country. I've seen that in the research throughout this country and several other countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Excellent presentation. Remind me next time we do something like this to just give you a half hour because you have such great information. I'm going to shorten our intros a little bit just to make sure that we do have enough time in the program that we have left. Our next speaker, Dr. Susan Nortier-Holman, earned her doctorate in clinical psychology from George Washington University and a PhD degree in the history of medicine from University College London, where she is an honorary senior research fellow. She also holds a master's degree in the history of science, medicine, and technology from Oxford University. Dr. Holman has lived and worked on 3 continents. She collaborates closely with scholars and researchers in Mexico, Australia, Spain, Italy, the UK, South Africa, and Kenya. Dr. Holman will speak to us about the psychological impact of poverty on family well-being. Dr. Holman, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. What a privilege to find myself here in a room with so many other people who care about something this important, and caring about those who find themselves on the very margins of survival. I grew up in Africa, and no matter where in the world I find myself, I carry within me the African concept of Ubuntu. The essence of being human is always present in my mind. Dr. Desmond Tutu probably said it best when he explained that a person is a person only through other persons. My humanity is caught up in yours. I am fully me only if you are all that you can be. I would like to speak today about the often silent and unseen psychological deprivation that accompanies the material deprivation of families living in poverty, many of whom will never have the opportunity to be all that they can be. Our families can insulate us from the impacts of poverty and emotional affliction, what Tim was talking about so eloquently, to the extent that they can be supported themselves. We're influenced tremendously by our families of origin. From the time we are born, we begin to form early attachments to our primary carers. This need for connection and attachment to others continues with us throughout our lifespan. Our families can provide a secure base from which we can explore the world around us, or, when unsupported, the world becomes unpredictable and unsafe. When we look holistically at the intersectionality between the often dire physical circumstances in which some families around the world find themselves and the psychological, we pause for a moment and realize that these become almost indistinguishable. Now, as you might imagine, this is a vast area of research and scholarship, but there is still a lot that we can accomplish in the 9 minutes and 46 seconds that I have left. And so I would like to make 3 main points. And if you remember even just one when you leave here today, I will be very happy. There is, first of all, a link between poverty and mental illness. Second, poverty and displacement impacts the parent-child bond very significantly. And third, there is actually neurobiology to poverty that impacts family relationship. Research shows that chronic stress that accompanies living with poverty can trigger mental illness. And there is also a cyclical relationship. numerous studies have shown that concentrated urban poverty, for example, cultivates mental illness, while the resulting mental illness in turn cultivates poverty. The end result is a feedback loop that links poverty and mental illness in an unequivocally and undeniable manner. So let me throw some statistics here out to frame the issue. The Centers for Disease Control estimate that 26% of individuals who regularly utilize homeless shelters, including families, suffer from serious mental illness. Second, the rates of those who suffer from both mental illness and substance abuse disorders is close to 46%. That's almost half. 51% of the indigent population suffers from one or more psychiatric disorders, often untreated, compared to 28% in the general population. You can see the discrepancy there. 33% suffer from mood disorders, such as depression or bipolar disorders, compared to 16% in the general population. And the incidence of anxiety disorders is approximately 35%, compared to 11% in the general population. The stress of everyday life, of scrambling for resources for families living in poverty, includes chronic and uncontrollable life events. These stresses impact the family unit as a whole, and it has been found to exacerbate family conflict. Hammack and Wadsworth and colleagues found that diagnosis of depression, anxiety, and aggression-related behaviors occur at higher rates in families under the crushing stress of poverty. Uncontrollable events include the psychological trauma that comes from socio-political instability and forced migration through war and natural disaster. This is, of course, particularly relevant right now. It has been shown to have an adverse impact on the mental health of children and families long-term if untreated. A study by the Canadian Collaboration for Immigrant and Refugee Health delineates migration into three distinct categories: pre-migration, migration, and post-migration. A few points on this. Refugees are at high risk for psychiatric disorders at every single one of these three junctures. They have a tenfold risk of depressive disorders, post-traumatic stress, chronic pain, and somatic conditions. In 2012, Betancourt and colleagues analyzed, through the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, a data set. They examined behavioral and psychological indicators of 60 child refugees from war-torn countries legally settled in the United States. They found PTSD, post-traumatic stress, in 30% of children, that's almost 1 in 3, generalized anxiety in 26%, somatization in 26%, and traumatic grief and behavioral problems in 21%. There are many other statistics which I will not go into now, but suffice to say that the stress of resettlement begins long before the actual migration occurs. During the height of the Syrian crisis, UNICEF estimated that 82% of Syrian families live below the poverty line, and malnourishment among pregnant women and children was rampant. We can very likely expect to see similar data coming out of Gaza. Post-birth mental health in mothers who have been separated from their children was assessed as well. And we found that specific psychological vulnerabilities impact the attachment relationship between mother and child. The impact of poverty on the parent-child bond is not insignificant. Poverty and mental illness, when it occurs simultaneously, have the potential to disrupt the family bond. Attachment theory tells us that human beings are pre-wired for relationship. We are born for relationship. Our earliest experiences cumulatively help us construct internal working models of the self and the other. And this is largely based upon the quality of the interactions between ourselves and our primary caregiver. We get to keep these internal working models from our early childhood, and it becomes the prototype for our later relationships and interactions, in particular in close relationships, such as the relationships that we have with our friends, our significant others, and our children. When caregivers are consistent, available, reliable, and predictable, children become securely attached and free to explore the world around them. However, when caregivers are inconsistent, needy, reliant on their children for emotional support, what we call parentification, children learn that people are not to be trusted. that people are unreliable and unpredictable and unsafe. It is imperative that we have a look at how we can scaffold early relationships in children, especially those who find themselves in a simultaneous situation of poverty and displacement, and perhaps a mentally ill caregiver, to help them shore up their resources. Children in lower-income families are 1.86 times more likely to suffer from mental illness in adulthood, with boys between the ages of 7 and 8 most at risk. Poverty, therefore, is correlated with compromised mental health outcomes in families, and in particular in terms of the parent-child bond. It is in these circumstances that insecure attachment arises. Avoidant attachment tells us that I have to take care of myself under all circumstances. Relying on other people is unsafe and scary. Anxious attachment tells the child, I have to do everything I can to make sure that others will never ever leave me. Now, while there is no direct relationship between secure attachment and social class, the conditions of poverty, in the absence of protective factors such as social support, can create stress in families where caregivers are already very, very under-resourced and unsupported. It is under these stressful conditions that parents often report feelings of depression, hopelessness, and compromised coping skills. The daily struggle to survive can have a significant impact on the ability to parent with sensitivity and emotional attunement. Parental availability and responsiveness is inversely related to extreme stress, and repeated stressful situations can create a pattern of unavailability as parents continue to fend for the family's most basic survival needs. It is in the face of such conditions that parents may turn to an authoritarian parenting style that is overly harsh in discipline and leaves very little room for building an actual real relationship. It is therefore the cumulative effect of stress, lack of social and community support, and mental health issues that create this perfect storm for the disruption in the parent-child bond that puts people at risk in the ways that Tim so eloquently explained a while ago. The mental health of the primary caregiver is another aspect that we really should pay close attention to. I'm not going to say too much about this. We're a bit constrained in time. But suffice to say that depression in the mother in particular has an inverse relationship to warmth, and if left untreated, predisposes the child and the entire family to disengagement and disorganization. Children living in poverty, cared for by a clinically and chronically depressed mother, show an increased risk for aggressive behaviors, disruptive conduct, and relationship difficulties with others. These risks appear even greater for children growing up in meager socioeconomic conditions as a result of the cumulative effects of stress in the absence of social and even extended family support. I will end today by just briefly mentioning the neurobiology of poverty, which is becoming increasingly known to us. We have evidence that correlates the hippocampal volume in the brain in childhood as affected by growing up poor. Martha Farrar and her colleagues found that poor children do worse on memory tasks, and these authors hypothesize that it is not only because the hippocampus volume is lower, the main mediator for memory consolidation is involved here. It is also the hippocampus that contains within it a significant number of stress hormone receptors. So the more environmental stress the child is surrounded with, the more likely it is that the hippocampus stress hormone receptors get activated. The role of stress is significant. The frontal cortex, in the front part of your brain, where affective attunement and empathy is mediated, becomes less available during times of severe stress as the back here, your limbic system takes over. As the limbic system becomes more activated, the frontal lobes become less activated, leading to a decreased capacity for empathy. When Lundy's research team analyzed the effects of poverty on the brain, they found that the children who were most affected were those mothers who were less nurturing because they experienced the most stress at home. Poverty certainly exacerbates this link. Researchers are now also including the effects of poverty on the brain of the fetus. But regardless of the neuroscience, we don't really need science to tell us a lot of this, right? It is clear that early intervention helps those in poverty manage stressful situations, that poverty alleviation strengthens family bonds, and that it will improve the circumstances emotionally and psychologically. I will end here for today, except to say that the bonds with the human beings around us is ultimately the collective fabric that keeps us safe from anxiety, adversity, and that gives us hope. It has been said that poverty is a thief of dreams. It does not have to be that way. I think there's a lot of people in this room with really good ideas for how we can stop that from happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. The next speaker is Mr. Errol Naidu. Mr. Naidu is the founder and CEO of Family Policy Institute, a nonprofit pro-family public policy research and educational organization based in Cape Town, South Africa. Mr. Naidu is a regular contributor in the national media in South Africa, an author, columnist, public speaker, and pro-family advocate. In 2016, Errol formed the Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation South Africa. The coalition consists of more than 40 national organizations working together to end sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, and abuse of women and children in South Africa. Mr. Naidu will speak to us today on the significance of the family and poverty eradication in Africa. You have the floor.
Thank you, Lisa. Mountains of social studies have verified the natural family is the only reliable, consistent social safety net for men, women, and children. In Africa, and particularly South Africa, the intact two-parent family consistently produces the best outcomes for children. The World Family Declaration states, and I quote, "The family, a universal community based on the marital union of a man and a woman, is the bedrock of society, the strength of nations, and the hope of humanity. As the ultimate foundation of every civilization known to history, the family is the proven bulwark of liberty and the key to development, prosperity, and peace." What we are witnessing in South Africa and the continent of Africa today is the degree to which liberty, prosperity, and peace diminishes in a country is more often than not linked to the disintegration of the foundational institution of the natural family. The University of Cape Town's Children Institute reports only 33% of children live with both biological parents in South Africa today. Single-parent families, headed primarily by mothers, represent 40% of homes, with the majority of these households dependent on social welfare. 20% of children live in homes without both parents. As a result of widespread family breakdown, social welfare budgets have soared in South Africa, outstripping GDP growth. A recent study indicates that almost 30 million people out of a population of approximately 60 million are completely dependent on social welfare grants, comprising about 17% of state expenditure in a country with a shrinking taxpayer base. South Africa has one of the most extensive social welfare systems amongst developing nations in the world. Dependence on social welfare correlates with a growing number of fatherless homes. Child support grants have risen steadily since 1994, totaling now almost 77 billion rand. As the natural family disintegrates and the social safety net it traditionally provides ruptures, millions of citizens are forced into state welfare programs, causing untold misery. A recent report titled "Reducing Child Poverty, a Review of Child Poverty and Value of the Child Support Grant," commissioned by the Department of Social Development in South Africa and researched and written by the Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town, found that 8 million children in South Africa suffer from severe malnutrition as a result of poverty. According to Linton Mkunu, the Director General of the Department of Social Development, 13 million children currently receive child support grants. Despite this and other social security interventions, such is the depth of poverty. An estimated 27.5% of children are stunted due to malnutrition. This tragedy is playing out in the African continent's largest and most modern economy, where billions are squandered every year through state-facilitated theft, fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and gross maladministration that cripples and often destroys critical state infrastructure. A 2022 World Bank Poverty and Equity Brief reports approximately 55.5%, or 30.3 million people of the population, is living in poverty at the national upper poverty line, which is ZAR 992, while a total of 13.8 million people, that's 25% of the population, experience food poverty. This means a total of 44 million people out of a population of 60 million live in some degree of poverty. Another tragic consequence of family breakdown is the skyrocketing rates of teenage pregnancies in South Africa. Fatherless homes are identified as a major contributing factor. In 2021, South Africa's Department of Basic Education presented its strategy to Parliament on reducing teenage pregnancies in South Africa. The teen pregnancy statistics were truly horrifying. They reported 136,386 pregnancies in the age group 10 to 19 years in 2020 alone. Over 500,000 teens fell pregnant in just 4 years, effectively ending their schooling careers. Tragically, girls in these age groups appear to be the most vulnerable in South Africa. Rape, sexual abuse, and HIV infections are also highest among teenage girls. The South African government's controversial sexual rights policies are often to blame for these outcomes. The sexual rights, rather than sexual responsibility focus of South Africa's sexuality education programs have proved catastrophic in a culture grappling with endemic family breakdown, fatherless homes, and plagued by widespread sexual exploitation and abuse of vulnerable women and children, exacerbated by a failing criminal justice system. The shocking fact that more than 14,000 girls aged 10 to 14 years fell pregnant in 4 years reveals an alarming moral crisis in South Africa, and family breakdown is the root of this problem. An equally tragic fact is that the birth rates would have been much higher if not for the high rates of abortions amongst teens. A report recently declared a teenage girl has an abortion every 10 minutes in the Eastern Cape province. Pregnant schoolgirls, some as young as 12, were putting a strain on the Eastern Cape abortion clinics, the Times in South Africa reported. Significantly, the Eastern Cape province is also where 33% of children live without both parents, the highest in the country. These are also the poorest homes in the nation. Diminishing parental authority is a major contributing factor to the social crisis among children. Instead of strengthening and supporting the rights of parents to help guide their children, government policy increasingly undermines parental rights and authority. For example, public schools often intentionally bypass parental authority to indoctrinate children with sexual rights propaganda that often conflicts with the parents' beliefs and values. This effectively drives a wedge between parents and their children, undermining parental ability to instill values and responsible behavior in their own children. Gangsterism is another tragic consequence of fatherless homes in the Western Cape. Street gangs numbering thousands of members terrorize low-income townships. Crime, violence, murders, prostitution, drug dealing, and other forms of organized crime is rife in the Cape Flats regions of Cape Town. The vast majority of young men and women caught up in gangsterism come from dysfunctional fatherless homes. Tragically, the gang is viewed as an alternative to the family these people were deprived of. Organized crime and prostitution are closely linked. These and other social ills are often traced back to family breakdown and dysfunction. As the natural family disintegrates in South Africa, poverty, crime, violence, prostitution, teen pregnancies, drug and alcohol abuse, school dropouts, and gender-based violence have all skyrocketed. The absence of any public policy aimed at addressing the root causes of family breakdown has inadvertently contributed to the degradation of family life in South Africa. This tragedy is being played out in many African nations, despite the fact that the Universal Declaration on Human Rights declares and I quote, "The family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and entitled to protection from government and society," end quote. Although the declaration has remained consistent since 1948, governments appear to have abandoned its obligations to the natural family, with devastating results for society as a whole. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights further states motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance, and, as stated in the Declarations of the Right of the Child, every child should, wherever possible, grow up in the care and under the responsibility of his or her parents. It declares that a functional, nurturing family founded on marriage between a man and a woman provides the surest safeguard of the special care and assistance to which children are entitled. Ubuntu, which my colleague just mentioned, is an ancient African word meaning humanity to others. It is often described as a reminder, I am what I am because of who we all are. In South Africa, Ubuntu birthed the philosophy, it takes a village to raise a child. Although a noble sentiment, I must disagree. It takes a family to raise a child in a stable and loving home. Social studies consistently indicate the two-parent intact family is the best environment to raise a child. In reality, the village consists of families, the actual building blocks of every village and society. When the family breaks down at the rates we see in South Africa today, the village is fractured and rendered dysfunctional. Every village, therefore, is only as strong as the family unit that undergirds and sustains it. The village, therefore, cannot raise the child if the family unit fails. As a consequence, nothing can truly compensate for the natural family. The family existed prior to the state and possesses inherent dignity and rights which states are morally bound to respect and protect. Sadly, the primacy of the family is a fact mostly ignored by governments today. I agree with the World Family Declaration that, I quote, "The family is the fountain and cradle of new life, the natural refuge for children, and the first and foremost school to teach the values necessary for the well-being of children and society. The family truly is our link to the past and bridge to the future." However, this intergenerational link is under severe threat. Okay, I need to conclude. We cannot change the world for the good or in the best interests of its citizens if we don't begin with the restoration of the family first. The foundations must be reinforced before we can begin with the rebuilding process, because any structure is only as resilient as its foundation. The family must therefore be anchored to the cornerstone of marriage between a man and a woman, an ancient institution that served countless civilizations. When asked what can be done to promote world peace, Mother Teresa answered, "If you want to change the world, go home and love your family." We must restore the love, respect, and sanctity of family life to heal our societies. Numerous social studies have concluded there is simply no alternative to the family. As a result, the natural family remains the unique and indispensable foundation of every society and therefore the hope of nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Errol, and thank you to our excellent panelists. We are getting close to being at the end of our time, but we do want to open the floor to member states who are part of the group of the Friends of the Family, as well as to a couple of our sponsoring pro-family organizations for short 2-minute interventions, please. And I'll first give the floor to our representative from Iran.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for holding this great meeting, and I'm so happy to be in the group of the Friends of Family. Iran is also one of the member states of this group and one of the countries which has its own concerns regarding the family and actually holding the true form of family. What the respected panelists just told about eradication of poverty from the family and the numbers and the statisticals that they provided regarding the kind of drastic decline of family values and the increase of poverty among new forms of family are all true. But one of the concerns that we have is that in some communities, we may be facing the eradication of the family itself instead of eradication of the poverty from among the families. So I think what is more basically our concern is to keep the original and natural form of the family. It was the basis of the suggestion made by our president in the UN General Assembly recently to have a kind of global movement for protecting family. So what the panelists just told about the kind of the recommendations we can have for families at a national level are all true. But I think we can make use of the potential of this group and similar groups to have a kind of movement, a global one, to be able to keep the original and the true and the right form of the family. I think we should use actually the potential of this group to establish global movements, to look at the proposition and the idea of keeping the family in a wider scope, in a global one. And I actually announced our readiness to be one of the members of this global movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call on Campaign Life Coalition, the Vice President, Matt. I've been practicing your last name all day. Help me. Wojciechowski.
Good job, Lisa. I'll try to keep this short. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates and panelists, first of all, thank you very much for your wonderful presentations today. It's a privilege to speak on behalf of Campaign Life Coalition. We are a Canadian NGO working to ensure that the right to life and the protection of the natural family is reflected in legislation and policies in Canada and abroad. Our mission, which is rooted in principles that transcend borders, is very much aligned with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection. 30 years ago, in his letter to families, Pope John Paul II articulated the significance of the family unit, underscoring the irreplaceable role it plays in shaping our world, reminding states of the duty that they have in safeguarding the growth and stability of the family as an institution founded on marriage, as a union between a man and a woman with the purpose of raising children. This community of persons, as the Pope highlighted, is the first human society, a social institution which neither can nor should be replaced. As we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family, I wish to reflect on some of the late pontiff's prophetic words highlighted in his letter, and to also point out their relevance in the context of the challenges we face today. 30 years ago, he wrote about the significant shift in attitudes towards the natural family, calling out, quote, the various programs backed by very powerful resources seeking to break down the family. He continues to say that at times it appears that efforts are being made to present as normal and attractive situations which are in fact irregular. He says that these efforts contradict the truth and love which should inspire and guide relationships between men and women, thus causing tensions and divisions in families with grave consequences for children. 30 years later, it has become clear that many member states, predominantly in the West, supported by UN agencies, have abandoned their responsibility to protect the natural family. Instead of fostering a culture of appreciation for families by investing in policies that promote motherhood and fatherhood and the gift of new human life, they have turned to ideologically motivated programs that aim to redefine marriage, parenthood, procreation, and what it means to be male and female, in direct opposition to the moral and social norms that uphold the family unit as the first school of love, and parents as the primary educators of their children. Some are replacing education with sexual indoctrination that fractures the parent-child relationship, rejects objective truth and basic human biology, and puts children at risk of harmful, irreversible medical practices. In the context of eradicating poverty, how often today do we see governments and international agencies prioritize population control through abortion and sterilization as a means of poverty reduction? They see human flourishing and large families as a cause of poverty rather than the antidote. We cannot eradicate poverty by eradicating the poor. That is a fact. We must turn to the family as the model for security and prosperity when facing economic and social instability. It should not be reduced to a mere lifestyle choice. And I conclude that it is imperative that all member states, including those in the group of friends of the family, take to heart the ideals set in the International Year of the Family and to push back against the ideological impositions that we often see here at the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'd like to call on the representative from Syria.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I'm just going to speak for like less than 1 minute. I would like first to thank the colleagues and brotherly missions of Qatar, Egypt, and Belarus for the holding of this really important meeting, and for the panelists as well for their important information. Actually, Syria was one of the latest countries who joined this group, and it was the easiest process ever. And we were just wondering why we were not part of this group when it began in 2016, I believe. And when I went back to my capital, the answer was really like, no doubt, yes, we will join. We share the same values. Our brothers from Qatar, Egypt, and Belarus, and all of other colleagues in the group as well. And we look forward for the upcoming 30th anniversary of the International Year of Family in Qatar in October, and we will participate and we will engage in all way possible. I thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to call on the representative from Saudi Arabia.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll translate my speech in Arabic. I
would like to thank the state of Qatar, Belarus, and Egypt for organizing this side event. These matters are of importance to families. Among the important matters that should be dealt with extensively. I'm speaking in a way that relates more to the Gulf states. There is a big economic transformation in the Gulf states. We are diversifying the sources of income as well as the open market economy. It is very important to focus on the weak links and the poor families, and we should protect them from falling into poverty along with the transformation of trends into open market economies. And we see the impact of this in changing the rates of procreation as well as change in the levying of taxes. We should take into consideration all these points, and we have to try and reduce the impact rather than trying to find solutions after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on the representative from the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I avail myself of this opportunity to thank the permanent missions of Belarus, Egypt, and Qatar for organizing this important and timely side event, which give us better insight into the topic of interrelatedness between the well-being of the family and the prosperity of society. The family is and will always be a major contributor to the sustainable and, in particular, social development. For this reason, member states and the organization of the United Nations system should strengthen family policy development in their ongoing efforts to achieve the internationally agreed development goals contained in 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As it was rightly mentioned earlier this week at the Commission's for Social Development's high-level discussion on the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family, family policies should be mainstreamed through the SDGs. To reaffirm faith to its commitment to protect and safeguard family, this year was proclaimed in the Russian Federation the Year of the Family. Russian family-oriented programs and policies are consistently being strengthened and developed on the basis of needs and hopes expressed by the Russian people. In 1948, the Universal Declaration for Human Rights defined family as a basic unit of society. The time has passed, and today we are witnessing how this natural and evident statement is being turned into a matter of political manipulations. The family itself, as well as family values, face unprecedented risks. This is why today it is more important than ever to come together, to close the ranks and join the efforts of the group of friends of family. We are on the verge of large-scale intergovernmental processes. The Pact for the Future is being negotiated, while the Declaration on Future Generation is only ahead of us. The Second World Summit for Social Development is scheduled for 2025. That's why we are at the crucial moment when our voices should be heard, because we cannot allow these processes to ignore the very core of life. And last but not least, I would like to thank distinguished panelists for excellent presentations. I thank you.
Thank you. Next is Annie Franklin from Family Watch International.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm grateful for these who have taken part and for the participation in the organizing of this wonderful event by Belarus, Egypt, Qatar, and a group of friends of the family. We're really grateful for their sponsoring of this. I don't want to be greedy because you've already given me, 4 minutes on the little video. So I will donate that time and only tell you a couple of things, but perhaps ask you to see what we do as Family Watch International and go to our website to find more information. We have specialized in the last 10 years on pointing, focusing and showing the dangers of comprehensive sexuality education. That has been our war cry, and also on many other things that have been outlined in this forum today. I'm just going to tell you that what is it about the family that is so powerful that it has garnered such a place in these fundamental documents that we've talked about, the UDHR and all those documents, these treaties that have completely shown why it's important to have the family as in the unit, sacred unit that it is. So why is it so powerful about the family? The stable family provides an atmosphere of happiness, love, and understanding where children and youth learn healthy attitudes toward women and girls, disease prevention, food production, preparation, sanitation, income-generating skills, intergenerational solidarity, and sustainable treatment of the environment. All these attitudes, habits, and skills are largely shaped within the family as children develop. While children acquire these positive skills and attributes will determine the quality of the human capital available to contribute to economic and social development. The family is cross-cutting issues that impact all the SDGs and therefore merit great attention and focus. If we hope to lift people out of poverty, ensure quality education for our children, eradicate maternal and child mortality, eliminate disease, elevate women, and create a fair, equitable, and sustainable world for all, we must shift the rhetoric from merely appreciating the family and prioritizing them as worthy of study, as it has been shown, investment, and partnership. All these at this event highlights so well the family as a shared human experience and reality, truly embraces across all cultures and moral tradition, and is indeed worthy of protection by the states and society. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. And Lynn Walsh, our last speaker from Universal Peace Federation.
Thank you very much. This is such a rich collection of statements, data, perspective, values that I should introduce myself. That is so much needed. I'm from Universal Peace Federation, and truly, all the presentations today underline how universal the family is, and the family must be universally valued again. And I think these kind of presentations really underline how we can awaken the world, how important the family is. I'm also from the NGO Committee on the Family, which didn't used to be so pro-family, let me say. I have a question. I mean, it's so good to hear that the group of friends of family is growing. I have a kind of a hopeful question, because so many countries are dealing with population decline. Is there hope that we're going to recognize again that families are critical? And how do you have more babies? Well, a man and a woman are committed to each other, value children, and understand how critical the family is, but also how personally rewarding it is. So the NGO Family Committee is actually having a program during CPD on population development and fertility. So we hope to kind of open up more discussion about the family is absolutely critical. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. In conclusion, I'd like to thank Ekaterina from Belarus for all her hard work in coordinating today's event. I know you worked really, really hard on it. I'd also like to say a sincere thank you to the member states here that are working so hard to include family policy, family language in resolutions. I know how difficult it is, and it's really amazing to think that family language could be so controversial. But I appreciate all your hard work in trying to make this a priority. I'd like to thank again the group of the Friends of the Family, the Secretariat, our panelists, and all our participants for being here today. I'd like to encourage you to be bold and stand for the family. Thank you.